What's up everyone and welcome back to the World History Channel. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button today. Let's get started. By resisting the Nazis, the Angel of Auschwitz saved thousands of lives. During World War II, in one of the darkest periods of world history, a drama of epic proportions unfolded behind the high brick walls of Germany's notorious concentration camp known as Auschwitz. The heartbreaking tales from Nazi death camps like Auschwitz, which survivors described as a virtual hell on earth, are too numerous to count. This comes, in part, as a result of the fact that the camp ended the lives of approximately 1.6 million prisoners at Auschwitz alone. However, as the Holocaust's most infamous villain, Dr. Joseph Mengele, sought to destroy the innocent, there was an angel of light who used her power to undermine him at every turn, essentially changing the course of many lives. Gisela Perl was a resourceful woman who used her medical skills to show mercy to the innocent in the only way that was possible, which was to die. She was dubbed the Angel of Auschwitz by those who loved her. During a time when the world was rife with political lunacy and people were hiding underground, this Angel of Light worked side by side with the Angel of Darkness to defy one of the most terrifying regimes in history and provide freedom to the most innocent of all, the unborn. Even though the brutal Gisela Perl stories might not make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside, they might just show you what it means to make difficult but heroic choices in the worst situation that can be imagined. When she and her family arrived at Auschwitz, they were forever separated. She and her family were separated forever as soon as they got to Auschwitz. Before Auschwitz became a stark reality, Gisela Perl worked as a successful Jewish gynecologist in Romania where she lived with her husband and 2 children. When her town was invaded in 1944, she made the spontaneous decision to leave her daughter in the safekeeping of some non-Jewish neighbors just hours before the Nazis knocked on her door. Soon loaded on a train with her husband, son, and elderly parents, Perl would endure a harrowing 8-day journey towards the living hell known as Auschwitz. The family was immediately separated upon arrival, and they would never see one another again. Perl, on the other hand, was different from the other women in her barrack because she was a doctor and a professional who might be of use to the Nazis. She was quickly placed in the camp's medical ward, where she would meet the notorious doctor, because her skills were useful in a place where disease and death were common. Joseph Mengele. As her captor and supervisor, she was subject to his every demand, even those that involved horrific experiments on human prisoners. She was duped into killing women who were pregnant. SS officers had an affinity for whipping the bare breasts of women at Auschwitz, and Perl was responsible for healing these wounds and performing surgery on pregnant women in distress. Her job was made extremely difficult by the camp's appalling medical conditions, which included no clean equipment, no running water or anesthesia. She took care of everything from diseases brought on by torture, filth, hunger, and vermin to skulls that had been broken open by violence. Before Perl understood the implications of her role as Mengele's assistant, she tried to satisfy his wishes by rounding up all the pregnant women in the camp for his inspection. He told her he wanted to make sure they were being properly fed and cared for. But his true intentions became clear the day Perl delivered up 50 expecting mothers to his medical ward, only to see them herded into a Red Cross truck and driven directly to the ovens. Perl couldn't bear to live another day, devastated by her error and filled with guilt for the deaths of these innocent women. In the dark, she performed abortions. Once Perl had a complete comprehension of Dr. Mengele, she made a conscious decision to work against him. She knew he was targeting pregnant women for his research, a fact that would only lead them to death, and she was determined to put a stop to his crimes. If he was hell-bent on butchering the pregnant women at Auschwitz, she would have to help these innocent mothers find a way to escape their dire situation. As a result, she began performing covert abortions at night in the filthy barracks, working in the dark so that Mengele and the SS officers would not be suspicious. She was aware that their situation in the camps might not last forever, and if she could just keep these pregnant women alive for a while longer, they might one day be able to raise healthy families. Her boss was a maniac with medicine. Dr. Joseph Mengele was not just any doctor during the Holocaust. He was a medical maniac of the highest order. Interested in the difference between identical twins and people with physical abnormalities like heterochromia iridum, eyes of two different colors, Mengele performed endless experimental surgeries on prisoners who could offer no resistance at Auschwitz. Given the circumstances of the war, he was accountable to no one and was able to validate his work using grant money from the government. His medical ward was conveniently attached to the crematorium, which heightened the ease of his experimentation and made disposal of bodies simple. Pearl bore witness to these atrocities, and even worse, she was expected to assist him whenever he requested. She watched as the Angel of Death performed horrific experiments on prisoners. Mengele, one of Auschwitz's 30 doctors, was driven by his own psychotic need to understand how different races looked and what made them different. When the new inmates arrived on the train platform, his favorite time of day, he could select his medical subjects from hundreds of unsuspecting women and children. He was, of course, never short on subjects and had a wide variety to choose from, always selecting those who he believed would best further his medical research. Once assigned to his ward, the prisoners were likely in store for a lengthy period of torture before they welcomed death with open arms. Mengele was known to perform medical dissections on conscious patients and use pregnant women and their unborn fetuses as guinea pigs in his perverse studies. When the procedures ended in death, he simply tossed the bodies in the crematorium. She remembers killing a living baby. Pearl's grief at the task she had to perform at Auschwitz was immense. She even tried to commit suicide in the years following her release. Her memories of the many abandoned infants and pregnant women at Auschwitz only served to exacerbate her grief. While most people respected her decision to help the innocent through aborting fetuses, there were still those who found her decision highly controversial. All in all, she is estimated to have performed close to 3,000 abortions during her time at Auschwitz and, by her own admission, even induced early labor in some women who were too far gone. These babies were mostly underdeveloped and died instantly in the darkness of the barracks. In her memoir, she also tells the story of one young woman who was so close to full term. The baby was born alive. Although Pearl tried to keep it safe, she was terrified the guards would hear his cries, which would surely mean death for some. As a result, she strangled the little warm body in her hands, kissed the smooth face, then buried him under a mountain of corpses waiting to be cremated. And she did so. She was unable to forget the horrors of Auschwitz. When Pearl was finally liberated from the hell of the camps, she published a memoir in 1948, I Was a Doctor at Auschwitz, in which she chronicled some of her darkest moments at the camp. The brutal tactics at the camp were legendary, and Pearl was deeply scarred by her time there and the lengths she had to go to in saving innocent lives. The senseless violence and death of that time haunted her for many, many years, much of which is carefully recounted in her autobiography. A group of men and women from the SS surrounded the women, amusing themselves by giving these helpless creatures a taste of hell, which made death a welcome companion. They were beaten with clubs and whips, torn by dogs, dragged around by their hair and kicked in the stomach with heavy German boots. Then, when they collapsed, they were thrown into the crematory, alive. She had to do things that she wouldn't have done before the war. Pearl showed in her memoir how the Nazis treated the prisoners at Auschwitz in a deeply evil way, torturing them not only physically but also emotionally. She wrote, "One of the basic Nazi aims was to demoralize, humiliate, ruin us, not only physically but also spiritually. They did everything in their power to push us into the bottomless depths of degradation. Their spies were constantly among us to keep them informed about every thought, every feeling, every reaction we had, and one never knew who was one of their agents. There was only one law in Auschwitz. The law of the jungle, the law of self-preservation. Women who used to be decent, self-respecting people now steal, lie, spy, beat the others, and even kill them if necessary to save their miserable lives. Stealing evolved into an art, a virtue, and a badge of honor. She also became a victim of these circumstances in this way, committing actions she would not have otherwise considered unacceptable. But, in these unique conditions, what she knew before in life no longer applied. There were new rules in place, and she had to work within them, no matter how difficult it may have been. The alternative was simply death. She treated desperate prisoners with her voice and her hands. Women who survived the war remember the kindness and compassion of Pearl, and how she helped many people endure the unthinkable. She would walk the ward at night, giving ointments to people with rashes and conversing with others in agony and despair. She frequently spoke encouraging words or reassuring tales to women who were on the verge of losing their minds, reassuring them that they would one day live again and reclaim their lives. She encouraged them to remain hopeful for the future and to be survivors. She treated them with her voice as well as her hands, even singing songs of Rosh Hashanah in a way to mark the Jewish New Year. To the women at Auschwitz, she was a hero. She was liberated only to find her family was dead. There was only one other camp during the Holocaust with the same terrifying reputation as Auschwitz, a place called Bergen-Belsen. Towards the end of the war, Pearl was transferred there as the Nazis tried to consolidate and dispose of the remaining Jews before approaching armies discovered them. Once she was liberated, she, along with millions of others, began searching for her lost family, only to discover her husband, son, and parents had all died just a few weeks before liberation. Pearl left Europe as soon as she could and tried to enter the United States, but the Naturalization Service heavily interrogated her because they thought she was a Nazi sympathizer. Her post-traumatic suffering and grief were intense during that time, and she even attempted suicide, but she was finally granted U.S. citizenship in 1951. She went on to deliver many healthy babies afterward, which she felt God owed her. After that, she gave birth to thousands of healthy babies. Pearl was the first to acknowledge that her work as a doctor at Auschwitz was more about accelerating death than it was about healing, demonstrating the insaneness of the Holocaust. After the war, her story became synonymous with heroism, and she even became friendly with Eleanor Roosevelt, who persuaded her to return to medicine. She went back to work as a gynecologist at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York after a few years, where she specialized in fertility treatment. A fitting way to say goodbye to Pearl, who had witnessed so much suffering in the past, was to deliver thousands of healthy babies to thankful mothers. As a way to acknowledge the darkness of Auschwitz, Pearl always said the same prayer at the entrance of the delivery room. God, you owe me a life, a living baby. And most of the time her wish was granted. She moved to Israel after discovering her missing daughter. Photo. Wikimedia Commons Public Domain. Pearl was later reunited with her grandson and her lost daughter, Gabriella. Although life had resumed for Pearl, she could not forget the parting scene with her family before they were separated at Auschwitz. As they were removed from the cattle car that fateful day and seized by Nazi officers, she was embraced by her husband and her father, who told her, "We will meet someday in Jerusalem." Pearl felt it was now time to make that dream come true and moved with her family back to Herzliya, Israel, where she would attempt to fulfill this final vow to the loved ones she lost in the Holocaust. Pearl died at 81 in 1988 and would be forever remembered as the Angel of Auschwitz, who brought mercy to the innocent. During World War II, amidst the unimaginable horror of Auschwitz, the most notorious of Nazi death camps, there emerged a figure of extraordinary moral courage. Dr. Gisela Pearl, known by survivors as the Angel of Auschwitz. In a place where over 1.6 million souls perished and hope was routinely crushed under the boot of systematic cruelty, Pearl's quiet rebellion became a symbol of resistance, mercy, and impossible heroism. A skilled gynecologist from Romania, she arrived at Auschwitz with her family in 1944, only to be separated from them forever. Deemed useful by the Nazis because of her medical training, she was placed under the command of the infamous Doctor. One of the most chilling war crimes ever committed is Joseph Mengele's grotesque experiments on prisoners, which earned him the moniker Angel of Death. Initially manipulated by Mengele's deceptive promises, Pearl unwittingly delivered 50 pregnant women into his hands, only to watch in horror as they were sent directly to the crematorium. This event became a turning point in her life, filling her with unbearable guilt but also a fierce resolve. Realizing that pregnancy equaled death in Auschwitz, she made the agonizing decision to secretly perform abortions in the dark, unsanitary barracks, saving countless women from Mengele's clutches and certain death. Under horrific conditions, without anesthesia, proper equipment, or even clean water, she risked her own life nightly to carry out these procedures. She believed that if the women could survive, they might one day have families again in freedom. Her secret work saved the lives of thousands, even though it broke her spirit. She recalled performing nearly 3,000 abortions, including some in which the infants were born alive. One heart-wrenching moment in her memoir recounts how she was forced to end the life of a newborn baby to prevent the SS guards from discovering its mother, an act that haunted her forever. Mengele's perverse experiments, especially on twins and pregnant women, were conducted in rooms attached directly to the crematorium, making his sadism efficient and his crimes almost invisible. Pearl, though forced to assist, made every effort to protect the vulnerable when she could. After liberation, she struggled with overwhelming grief and even attempted suicide, but eventually found a path forward. Moving to the United States, she resumed her medical practice and helped deliver over 1,000 healthy babies in freedom, a poignant testament to her redemptive strength.